Communication is defined as a purposeful activity of exchanging information and meaning across space and time using various technical or natural means, and only when the receiver understands the sender's message is when the communication process is complete. There are two important factors that go into productive communication, and they are effective speaking and effective listening. Effective communication is an important part of so many different activities in life, like education, the military, and conducting business properly. In the business world, the Human Resource Department uses effective communication to deal with the hiring, administration, and training of personnel. Effective communication is also a very productive way to do business with other countries and cultures, countries like Cuba. Through the remainder of this presentation, an overview of Cuba will be presented, identification of communication differences between cultures as it applies to Cuba will be discussed, and a successful way to do business with Cuba will be explained.
Cuba is an island of contrast and was discovered by Christopher Columbus on October 27, 1942. According to www.cubainfo.de, the conqueror Diego Velázquez was the first to found the country's 7 cities at the beginning of the 16th century. These cities include Barauca, Bayamo, Santiago de Cuba, Trinidad, Santi Spiritus, Camguay, and Havana. In doing some reading and research on the culture of Cuba, I found that Cuba has many different cultures and is known for its diversity. The Cuban cultures are built from Spanish, African, Jews, Indians, French, and Asian influences. The population of Cuban culture includes whites, blacks, farmers, townies, and fishers. It is amazing that Cuba has such a melting pot of people and so diverse. The common language of Cubans culture is Spanish, and the Spanish language is spoken very fast with an accent to each word. Cubans culture is known for its happy people on the islands and is famous for its intoxicating rhythms of dance, which includes the bolero, the mamba, and the cha-cha. According to www.britannica.com, the Ministry of Culture directs a program of education in music, visual arts, ballet, dramatic arts, and modern dance, culminating in the university level Higher Institute of Art. In looking up the culture's favorite foods, I found that the typical cuisine for Cuba includes pork and rice. Some dishes of the culture's favorite dishes are black beans and rice, stew of meat and vegetables, roast pig, and a variety of tropical fruits. In researching the Cubans' culture and religion, I found that an unexpected number of Cubans are non-religion. About two-fifths are Roman Catholics, and the main religion movement is Santeria.
According to www.everyculture.com, the Cuban culture had arisen from a history of colonial and imperial takeover dating back to 1511 to 1 January 1959, where they gained their independence. January 1st isn't just New Year's to Cubans, but also Liberation Day and the triumph of the revolution. Many of Cuba's major holidays signify big events in their revolutionary past. Another major holiday they celebrate is July 26th, Day of the Rebellion. Lastly, there is Christmas, the 25th of December. They actually did not celebrate Christmas between the years 1969 to 1997 because it was banned by their government. It was finally reinstated as a holiday in 1997 after a visit from Pope John Paul II. Just like what was said earlier, a big part of Cubans' culture is music, dances, and food. All these play a part in how they celebrate their holidays throughout the year. With knowing a little bit of the Cuban culture, let's venture into the identification of communication differences between cultures.
when endeavoring to discuss the communication differences that exist between the United States and Cuba, one topic that must be touched upon is the political history that exists between the United States government and that of the Communist government of Cuba that has been in power since the late 1950s. When Fidel Castro took power and declared Cuba as a communist state, what little relations that existed between the U.S. and Cuba quickly deteriorated. The U.S. was in the throes of the Cold War, and the opposition of communism was the stance of the U.S. government. Fidel Castro was anti-American, which he viewed as imperialistic, and was leaning ever closer to align with the communist bloc headed by the USSR, which is the former Soviet Union. When Fidel took power, he severed any private enterprises that had economic ties to the United States. It was mainly for these reasons that the U.S. government severed any political ties to the government of Fidel Castro. Besides the political actions of the U.S., they engaged in some activities to further alienate themselves from the Cuban government that was led by Fidel Castro. These activities included an estimated 638 assassination attempts on the life of Fidel Castro by the CIA. Along with these attempted assassinations, there was an attempted invasion of Cuba by a paramilitary force of exiled Cubans trained and equipped by the CIA, which is known today as the Bay of Pigs invasion. The invasion was not only a failure, but a major catalyst to the already deteriorated relations between the two governments. These circumstances have led to a rift both politically and economically that has continued to exist for some 4 decades. Until recently, there was still an embargo placed on goods from Cuba, hence why Cuban cigars are illegal. In December 2014, the U.S. government and the Cuban government initiated actions to potentially ease the tensions between the two countries. One can only hope that these talks will lead to improved political relations and ease some of the communication differences that have plagued U.S.-Cuban relations for the past several decades.
There seems to be a lot of controversy over doing business with Cuba. President Obama spoke about it a few weeks ago, saying that his administration will seek to normalize relations with Cuba. The Cuban embargo is an economic, financial embargo imposed on the United States. It started in 1962. There are many pros and cons of the Cuban embargo. Some of the pros being the embargo enables the United States to apply pressure on the Cuban government to improve human rights. Another one is the United States is able to target the Cuban government with its embargo while still providing assistance to Cuban citizens. And then finally, another pro is Cuba has not demonstrated a willingness to negotiate in good faith with the United States. Some cons being the embargo harms the U.S. economy. Another one is the embargo harms the people of Cuba, not the government as intended. And then finally, the embargo prevents the people of Cuba from joining the digital age by cutting them off from technology and restricts the electronic flow of information to the island. Once all of this is over, business with Cuba will strengthen the U.S. economy.
Cuba is a beautiful, diverse, and very contrasted country. Like our own American culture, the Cuban culture is a melting pot of many other cultures. Effective communication is an important part of so many activities like education, military, and conducting business productively. Effective communication is a very productive way to do business with other countries and cultures like Cuba. Furthermore, the American government is on the right track to end the embargo with Cuba and to return to doing trade with Cuba. This will only be possible by building communication with this country and adjusting our communication style to theirs. Most importantly, doing business with Cuba will strengthen the U.S. economy.